Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session to our webinar on standardized MedDRA queries today. My name is Anne Jullenswert, and I work as an international medical officer at the MSSO. And this is the position where we review and decide on your change requests. I do this together with four colleagues. I will be your instructor today, and just to let you know that I'm also one of the MedDRA MSSO representatives on the ICH M1 PTC working group. So we're going to look at one of the PTC documents, and I'm also working together with a lot of colleagues on those documents. Today I'm joined by my colleague Leander, who will help to facilitate the meeting. We will both take you through this webinar that will take around 2 hours. So we have plenty of time for exercises, some demonstrations, and also for addressing your questions. Please submit your questions during the webinar as we go through the slides, and submit it through the question panel that you can find in the control panel of the GoToWebinar application on the upper right-hand side of your screen. I will ask in between whether we have any questions, because I think it's always helpful to have your questions answered so that you can fully concentrate on the rest of the presentation. Now some more housekeeping items. Please be aware this is not a very interactive webinar. We want to show you a lot of things, explain a lot of things to you. So it's not like some of the Let's Code Together webinars, which are really thought as very interactive webinars. We will have some polling questions, but not as many as the ones in those webinars. We will have some browser demonstrations today. And as you might know, we also have a new web-based browser, which I will be using most of the time. Leander will put the link to the browsers into the chat of this webinar. So you can open the browser and follow along if you prefer that as your preferred learning style. But you can also just sit back, relax, and just watch me doing and showing you the things, and do it after the session. So really up to you what you prefer, how to learn and how to best follow this presentation. Before we jump into the topic, I would like to shortly address this slide, which many of you might be familiar with. The development of MedDRA was adopted by ICH in the mid of the 1990s, and ICH has finally become the owner of the terminology. The MedDRA Maintenance Support Service Organization, or short MSSO, was put in place by ICH to maintain, further develop, and to distribute MedDRA on contract. All of these MSSO activities are overseen by the ICH MedDRA Management Committee, which has members from industry and regulators from the ICH regions, as well as a member from the MHRA, from Health Canada, and the WHO, the World Health Organization, as an observer. Then we have one disclaimer slide, which is quite busy, so I will try to summarize it. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA, but also owns this training material. It is protected worldwide, but you may use the slides with the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos. And if you do that, you will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. If you make any adaptations of the slides, you also have to clearly label these and also indicate that ICH does not was not involved in those modifications, does not support these. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issue, and as it is legal language, I will just read it out for you. The presentation is provided as is without warranty of any kind. In no event shall the ICH or the authors of the original presentation be liable for any claim, damages, or other liability arising from the use of the presentation. And then coming to the third bullet, this is not relevant for today as we are not using any third-party slides. So let's have a look on what we will cover today. We will review the content of the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation points to consider document. We will discuss specifically the features of standardized MedDRA queries, which will include a background and the data characteristics, the impact of MedDRA versioning on SMQs, and the benefits and limitations of using SMQs. Then we will demonstrate the SMQ analysis tool, which is embedded in our MedDRA browser. We will look at different SMQ applications and present 2 scenarios for the use of SMQs. And last but not least, we will address the so-called customized searches, where you build your own query or where you adapt an existing SMQ. And then we will also conclude with a question and answer session. But as indicated, I will also ask whether we have questions in between. So we always like to use some interactive form of meeting. And for this, we are using the Slido tool, which you can join at slido.com. And if you are asked, you can enter the number which is shown on the screen, the 2568879, or you scan the QR code with your phone or mobile device. If you need some time to do this, don't worry, because the QR code as well as the other joining instructions are shown on every slide. So let's just jump to the next one. And we would always like to know where in the world you are sitting at the moment and listening to this webinar. So please try to join Slido and provide us with your answers. I see them coming in. Lots of people from Turkey, from Italy, Portugal, Netherlands, Germany, lots of European countries, I see, South Africa, Czech, hello Barcelona, Stockholm, India is joining. So I see quite a broad representation, but mainly the European time zone this time. Okay, I also see that many of you already managed to join the Slido app. Thanks a lot for participating. For those not yet finished, you have the next possibility on the next slide. And I would like to ask you about your knowledge on SMQs and customized MedDRA queries. So 1 should be beginners, 5 experts, and I see we have it's still changing, some experts, but a lot of beginners. So that is really good, because I think that you will be able to get a lot of experience knowledge today. Great. Thanks for participating. And then let's have a look at the ICH guidance document, the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation points to consider document. I hope that some of you have already joined the webinar last week, which was also on data retrieval and presentation and query building, because we discussed some of the things. And for those people who joined last time, this will be a bit of a repetition, but we will not go into the same depth into the first sections of this document as we did last week. For those who missed the webinar last week, you would still have the possibility to view that on our YouTube channel, or to register for the next upcoming meeting where we discuss the data retrieval, presentation, and query building. This is a snapshot of the front cover of the full PTC document. It is the latest version, which was released in March 2024. You will soon get the next version, March 2025. This document provides guidance for retrieval and presentation options. And it's very important that it should be used in conjunction with the PTC document for MedDRA term selection, because only if your data is coded accurately and consistently, you will have a reliable basis for your data retrieval, presentation, and analysis. We also recommend this document to be used as a basis for your internal processes for data retrieval and analysis. And if you already have one, your document should not be in conflict with what is outlined in this PTC document. The PTC documents are developed and maintained by an international expert working group, which is appointed by the ICH Management Committee, and it includes members from regulators and industry of all the ICH regions. The MSSO and the Japanese Maintenance Organization, or JMO, are represented. And please note that this group does not only provide the guidance document for data retrieval and analysis, but also additional documents that provide guidance for operational coding, as well as a companion document with more examples. The complete document is available in several languages: English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and Russian. And these documents are updated with each major MedDRA version release, so the complex release, which is released in March, on March 1st every year. In addition, there are condensed shorter versions of this full document in several other MedDRA languages. And these are Arabic, Brazilian Portuguese, Czech, Dutch, French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Portuguese. These condensed versions focus on general data retrieval and presentation principles without going into further detail for selected topic. These are not updated with each MedDRA release, but only on an as-needed basis. You will find these documents on the MedDRA website and the website of the Japanese Maintenance Organization. And I can quickly show you how to access these. One way is to go through the browser. This is already the outline of the new web-based browser. If you go to Settings, Documentation, you can click on MedDRA Documentation, and you see this new icon showing up, which is a link which directly points you to the MedDRA.org website, to the How to Use section, Support Documentation. And here under the Points to Consider documents, you can find the various documents for MedDRA term selection, MedDRA data retrieval and presentation, as well as the mentioned Points to Consider companion document. The documents are available as a PDF file, as Word documents, so that you can easily copy and paste this into your own organization's procedures if you want to do that. And then as an HTML file. For the MTS PTC and the DRP PTC documents, we also provide a redline version, meaning that this is a Word document where all the changes between the new version and the previous version are highlighted with a red underline, which is a functionality which Word provides. And these redline version can help you identify changes quickly. So back to the presentation. This is what the data retrieval and presentation PTC document addresses. So there are some general principles which we discussed in more detail in the webinar from last week, as well as general queries and retrieval. And then today we will more focus on the standardized MedDRA queries and the customized searches. But to recap from the last time, I would just go through the general principles and provide some information. So the quality of source data is key. When receiving vague or ambiguous information, one should always seek clarification, because the quality of the data output really strongly relies on the quality of the data input. And if you don't focus on quality data input, it is really hard to, through the output part, to get something which was not done in data input to fix that in the output. As well, for good quality data input, it is very important to code medically accurate and consistent to provide a reliable basis for the data retrieval. And this is best guaranteed by following the MedDRA term selection Points to Consider guidance. It is very important to document the data retrieval and presentation practices within your organization. And you may consider using the PTC document as your in-house data retrieval and presentation convention if it's suitable. It's very important to document the MedDRA version which you use, the MedDRA version of your data. It's important to document the processes, the quality assurance, and so on within your data retrieval and presentation process. The very important third principle addresses a topic that we emphasize in actually all our training sessions, and that is do not alter MedDRA. Do not make any ad hoc changes to the standardized MedDRA terminology. And MedDRA is the standardized terminology. It has a predefined hierarchy, and you need to use it in that structure. If you find that, for example, a primary SOC allocation of a specific PT is not optimal, you can, of course, try to correct it and send us a change request to the MSSO. This is one of the enhancements of the new web-based browser, that you can submit change requests directly from the browser. But please be aware that for submitting change requests to the English version of MedDRA, a separate MedDRA password is needed. Some organizations do not share this password with every user, but there is a certain group of MedDRA experts within the company who is responsible for submitting change requests, and you would need to find out how that would work in your company. Then, very importantly, when performing data retrieval and analysis, you should be very knowledgeable about your organization's specific data characteristics. So you need to know the database structure, which level of MedDRA are stored in your database, and therefore easy to retrieve, or whether a programmer will be needed to perform a retrieval and analysis on a higher level of the terminology, or whether you can look at secondary SOC assignments and so on. Also very important is what kind of legacy data conversion to MedDRA did you perform? Did you use the original reported term for the conversion? So did you start off from the verbatim term, or did you use the coded term? Because based on the legacy term, these terminologies are less extensive, much less granular. So if a legacy data conversion was done based on the legacy terms only, your retrieval approach must be broader, considering those more unspecific terms. Also, very importantly, a lot of companies exchange cases. So you would also need to know how you treat cases from a partner company. Do you do a complete recoding of the case, or do you take code which another company picked for you? So all these things are important considerations when you are thinking about how to best retrieve your data. Then there are important characteristics of MedDRA itself, which are relevant for your data retrieval and analysis approach. And we discussed in the last webinar how these characteristics can be used to help you, but also what kind of challenges they pose to you when you're building a query. So we discussed a lot about the multi-axiality of MedDRA, but also that there are some system organ classes which do not have this multi-axiality, so that the PTs in those system organ classes would always need to be considered for every search, because they would just show up in that SOC. And last but not least, the versioning of MedDRA is important, and we will discuss some versioning more in detail within the next slides. These are the general principles. Then we also discussed the general queries and retrieval strategies. And today we will focus on standardized MedDRA queries as well as customized searches. So let us look at the versioning topic more in detail. And as you know, MedDRA is updated twice a year. We are approaching the 1st of March release, which is often called the complex release, or the version X.0 release. And this means that all levels of MedDRA can be changed. Then we have one other release on 1st of September, which is called the minor release, X.1 release. And in that release, we only perform changes on the LLT and PT level. It is very important that you document the version, the MedDRA version which you use in your data retrieval and presentation. And the last point which we have here, it's also very important that you use the same version of MedDRA for the query and for your data, for the data, the version in which your data has been coded. So if your data is coded in a previous version, you would also need to build a query in the previous version or have a upversioning strategy. So it's always very important that the MedDRA version of the data and the MedDRA version of the query are the same. So how do you get to know about changes which we made to MedDRA? And there are different resources that may be useful for you to better understand how versioning may impact your data. The MSSO always provides a What's New document, which is made available with each MedDRA release, and it provides a general overview on what has been changed and implemented in the new release. In addition, there's also always a What's New webinar where somebody explains to you the important changes in that MedDRA version. Then we have a detailed version report in the form of an Excel file, which lists all the changes in different tabs. For example, which new LLTs were added, the new PTs, primary SOC changes of PTs, moving of LLTs between PTs, SMQ changes, and so on. And this version report is always comparing the new to the previous MedDRA version. It might happen that you want to compare several MedDRA versions, and it would be quite a lot of work to go through all the version reports. So we also provide a tool that is called the MedDRA Version Analysis Tool, or short called MVAT, which gives you the possibility to compare any two versions. And we are going to look at this a little bit more on the next slides. So it's a web-based tool which you can access through the link which is shown here, but it has also been implemented into the new MedDRA browser. And just because it's new, I'm going to quickly show it to you where you can find it. So we have the tools section in the new web-based browser. If you click on it, you see that we have the MedDRA version report and the MedDRA version data impact report. But this is not the topic of now. So let's go back to the presentation. The MedDRA version analysis tool is free to all users, and it has several features. And one is the MedDRA version report generator, which produces also an Excel file, which is very similar to the version report, but you can choose any two versions. So it's not the last to the previous version or the latest to the previous version, but you can choose any two versions. And you can even look at the new supplemental term, meaning the terms which have been approved for the next upcoming MedDRA version, but which are still open for changes and have not been released. Then it gives you the possibility to do a data impact report, which identifies changes within your data set. So you can upload up to 100,000 rows of coded terms or of codes which you have used. And the tool will then run the report and identify what changed within your coded terms. It will also show you the amount of changes in general between those versions, but then give you a specific count of what changed in your data. Please be aware that this feature of the MVAT will not show you new PTs which became available, or it will show you the new PTs, but it will not compare your data against these new PTs. So it's not looking for better matches to your verbatim terms. You only upload your coded terms and it will show you what happened, how your data is now differently displayed in MedDRA based on changes in the MedDRA version. And then the third and last feature is that you can also upload or search for a single term and identify changes to that single MedDRA term. This is not implemented in the MedDRA version analysis tool in the MedDRA web-based browser, because there you have a history button, which you can use for looking at a term change across the MedDRA versions by just clicking on with the right mouse on the term and selecting the history button. Okay. Then the user interface and report output are available in all MedDRA languages. As I already said, you can also run a report against the supplemental changes. You have the ability to also include or exclude secondary SOC changes in your reports. And we have a two-part webinar on the use of the MVA tool in the Tools tab on the Training Materials page of the MedDRA website. And you see the link to that website down here. So I would not like to demonstrate the tool today due to time constraints, but if you're more interested in seeing it working, then please go use those recorded webinars. We will now look into SMQs in more detail, but before that, I think this would be a good time to ask Leander whether we received any questions on the recap.
No, we've had no questions. Thank you, Anne.
Okay, thank you. So we start off with asking you a question. And which level of the MedDRA hierarchy is generally used for building a query? Don't feel shy, just give me what you would think would be the right answer. I will not comment much on it. We will just see what you think, and then we will go through the rest of the presentation. So PT, yes, PT is very important. LLT, I see. HLT, yes. Okay, so many of you already voted. PT is definitely the level which most of you think about it. All the SMQs are described on PT level and published on PT level, so that is very correct that PT is used for building queries, for describing queries. HLT is also good when you are setting up your own query, because the HLT already groups relevant terms together. So if you find one PT which you want to include, it's very important to also look into the HLT and to find more PTs. The LLT can be used and is not usually used to define a query, but some people might need to use the LLTs for running the query. And we come to that now, because what is a query actually? And if you start from the left-hand side, you see that we have a clinical trial database or a safety database. And these databases contain cases with events coded to MedDRA LLTs. So here we have our LLTs, and each case can contain one or several LLTs. Then we define our query by looking at the medical topic and combining a set of terms to display that topic in the MedDRA hierarchy. So usually we will have the description of the query on PT level, and depending on your database, you might either use it directly with the PT level, or you would break it down to the LLT level, and by convention, all LLTs under a PT which is included in a query are also included in the query. So when running the query, a matching process takes place, which looks on the level which you decide upon. So here we say we are looking between the LLTs, and which matches the case with LLT1 to the LLT1 which the query looks for. And then if a match is found, this case will be retrieved and will be given to you in a certain way. So either as an output, or you might get all the cases in a certain repository within your database or your signal detection tool. So it depends on how your company is set up, where you would find those cases and how you would be given those cases. And these will then need further medical assessment, because just retrieving a case does not say that it necessarily is a case which is relevant for your topic of interest. So soon after MedDRA was more widely used, it became also obvious that standardized queries were needed for conditions that are relevant in the context of mainly drug safety and pharmacovigilance. Before the provision of the SMQs, the people building the queries selected different PTs and used these for providing retrieval results to, for example, regulators. And so the regulators got different searches for the same medical condition. For example, for hepatic damage, which is always a very important topic in pharmacovigilance, you could build a query with a very narrow scope, you could build it broader, but it was not really comparable if not the same search was done. And this was that people decided, yes, we need more standardization, and that is when the concept of the standardized MedDRA queries was born. With these SMQs, these standardized MedDRA queries, industry and regulators can perform searches for a specific condition in the same way. And this allows for a valid comparison of drug safety findings between different databases and also for different products. And like any other query, the SMQs present a grouping of terms from one or more MedDRA SOCs related to a medical condition or area of interest. And like any other query, they can contain terms for signs and symptoms, for diagnoses, for syndromes, physical findings, laboratory and other test data, etc. And they are, as other queries, also intended to aid in case identification. But the big benefit is that they are standardized and that they are pre-built for you. So it's not you who need to do all the work in setting them up, but a group of experts have already done that effort for you. And the other important thing is that these queries have also been tested in big databases. So usually a big company database and a regulatory database. So as of version 27.0 and same for 27.1, a total of 110 level 1 SMQs are in production, and we will see later on what this level 1 means. And if you look at the list, and this is of course not the complete list, you will see that most of the topics are really important medical conditions like agranulocytosis, anaphylactic reaction, convulsions, depression and suicide self-injury, shock, severe cutaneous adverse reactions. So you find queries for very important medical topics in which are often drug-related, but not only drug-related. But then you also find SMQs for topics like lack of drug effect, lack of efficacy effect, or for pregnancy and neonatal topics, as well as for medication errors. It is very advisable that you make yourself familiar with the topics that are covered by the SMQs so that you are able to use them for your queries in your database. And please note that regulators, for example, are using queries as a standard in their databases. So you might consider whether you want to look at the SMQs in your database on a regular basis as well. It will always depend on the amount of data you're looking at, whether it's meaningful or not. But just as a consideration, it might make sense to look at the same groupings of terms that regulators also look at, so that you're not surprised if some regulator finds something in the data and you haven't seen it yet. So a very valuable resource, which I would always recommend for you to look at, is the Introductory Guide for Standardized MedDRA Queries. It's very helpful because it defines the condition and provides the in- and exclusion criteria which were used to build the query, and some additional information about the structure and the hierarchy or algorithm of the SMQ and how to best use it. So every time you consider using an SMQ for a specific topic, out of the need to review the topic, please always take the time to read the introductory guide for SMQs, for that specific SMQ you're looking at, because you need to know what was done to build that SMQ, what is included, what is not included. Now let's look into the SMQ characteristics. The MedDRA term inclusion, the broad and narrow searches, algorithm, hierarchy, the status of an SMQ and the term status within an SMQ, as well as versioning. And we'll address these in more detail in the next slides. So as many of you already pointed out very correctly, SMQs are constructed at the MedDRA PT level. By definition, all LLTs under these PTs are automatically included into that search as well. And you see that the number of terms increases, the granularity increases the further down you go into the hierarchy of MedDRA. And you might need, when you're running the query, it depends on your database whether you can directly use the PTs or whether you need to break down the query to LLT level when running the query. It really depends on your database. Then let's look at a further topic, which is very important to understand. Every PT in a given SMQ is classified as a narrow or broad search term. The narrow preferred terms provide specificity, meaning they represent the name of the conditions, maybe in different wording. They are describing signs and symptoms that are highly likely to be indicative of the condition of interest. So with these, you find the cases with a high likelihood of matching the topic you're interested in. The broad terms provide sensitivity, so they try to retrieve all possible relevant cases. And it's often said that you cast a small net or a broad net. With this one, you try to retrieve all relevant cases. So they might contain lab tests or symptoms that could be characteristic for the condition of interest, but could also relate to another medical condition. But then it's very important to understand that if you want to run a narrow search, you take the narrow terms, which is quite well understood. But if you run the broad search, by conventions, you always take the narrow and the broad terms, which makes a lot of sense because you're interested in a topic, and that topic is best described by the narrow terms. So running a broad search without the narrow terms, you would miss all the relevant cases, right? So if you run a broad search, include all the narrow terms and all the broad terms. Then let's look at an example of an SMQ with broad and narrow terms. This is the SMQ lactic acidosis, and you'll find a definition, which I'm not going to read out to you. But you see that it just has very few narrow terms: blood lactic acid increased, hyperlactacidemia, lactic acidosis. And then you have a long list of broad search terms. But these are not specific to lactic acidosis. So acidosis could be any kind of acidosis. Acid-base balance abnormal could be any kind of acid-base, anion gap. So these can be signs and symptoms or lab tests which are relevant for lactic acidosis, but they might also give you a lot of cases which are not relevant for your specific topic. So it's important to consider how broad you want to go, whether you want to focus on your topic or whether you're unsure whether the cases are reported and coded in the best way, and you want to retrieve everything which is related. Then you would take the broad search terms as well, but it would also increase the amount of cases you need to review to see whether they cover the topic of interest. Oops, sorry, this was too fast. Then some SMQs are designed as algorithmic SMQs. And this means usually you have a narrow search, which you would always use. But then for the broad search, it became clear that if you include all these broad search terms, you will identify so many cases, so much noise, that it is really not helpful in looking through those cases for a specific topic. So if this algorithmic SMQ, if the algorithm is used, you usually have a combination of broad search terms, which make it more likely that the case you're looking at is really relevant for the topic of interest. And 10 out of our 110 SMQs have this algorithmic search possibility. So let's look at an example of the algorithmic SMQ anaphylactic reactions. And you see, and this is not the complete list of terms, of course, because it would not fit onto the screen, but you see that we have category A narrow search terms like anaphylactic reaction, anaphylactic shock, which are really very important for the condition of interest. But then you have a lot of symptoms of anaphylactic shock, which are usually not, if they are not in close relationship together with other symptoms, you would not find a case which is relevant. Look at asthma. Lots of people have asthma. Most of these don't have an anaphylactic reaction at the time of asthma. Same as in category C, erythema. Erythema is a very broad term, happening very often. It could be anything. The combination of certain of these reactions makes it more likely that you're looking at a case of anaphylactic reaction. So we have the narrow search term plus 3 categories broad search terms, and the category B describes upper airway and respiratory symptoms. Category C describes angioedema, urticaria, etc. And then category D, cardiovascular and hypotension terms. And the algorithm is applied in a way that you always take all the category A, the narrow terms, or a case where a term from category B and a term from category C is included, or a case where either a term of category B or category C plus a term of category D is included. And let's look at the next slide. It's all the same, just another representation in this flowchart. So when going through the cases, you first check for narrow terms. If you have a narrow term included in your case, it's a case to review. If you don't find a narrow search term, you check, do I have a term from category B? Yes. Then the next check is, do I have a term from category C? Yes. It's a case to be reviewed. I still have the term from category B, but not a term from category C. So you follow the no sign, and do I have a term from category D? If yes, it's a case to review. If not, this case is not identified for review. Same, no case from category B, you go further. Do I have a case with a category C term? Yes, check for category D. It might be a case for review. If not, you did not identify a case, or if you don't have the category D as a combination, you don't have a case. So the algorithm helps to increase the specificity of a single case identification when no narrow PT is assigned to the case. You can use the algorithm, but you can also run the SMQ without applying it. It makes a lot of sense then to just take the narrow scope term. One reason for not applying the algorithm is that it will require some programming effort if your database system does not support the algorithmic searches. If you use the algorithmic SMQs without the algorithm and the broad scope, you will retrieve a lot of irrelevant cases. So it's really a question on how you use them if you don't apply the algorithm. Maybe the narrow search is enough for you for the question you want to answer. Applying it with a broad search without the algorithm makes your life really difficult, because you will need to do a lot of medical review, medical assessment in the end for many cases where it's not relevant. Also, especially for this for this anaphylactic reaction topic, remember that you have other database fields in addition to MedDRA coded fields. So in anaphylactic reaction, the symptoms should always be in close relationship to the drug administration, but also in close relation to each other. Having a respiratory symptom on day 1 and a cutaneous symptom on day 3 would also not make it a very likely case to review for anaphylactic reactions. So please remember that there are always more database fields which can help you make your search more specific, and which you might want to include as well. Leander, do we have any questions at this time already?
Yes, we do have a question, Anne. We had a question in relation to how can you see the defined categories in MedDRA? I'm not sure if you're going to go on and demonstrate that.
I'm going to, yes. I will show you a lot about this when I do the browser demonstration. So we'll come to that, and I would ask you to just wait, and if I don't answer all the questions, please resubmit and we'll take it later on again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. And that's it for questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we also have SMQs which are hierarchical, meaning you have an SMQ with a broad topic at the top, and then it's often important to look at further subsets in your analysis, and that is why this overarching topic is broken down into several sub-SMQs. It's the hierarchy is not related to the standard MedDRA hierarchy, but it really describes that you have one or more subordinated SMQs which you can combine to create this superordinated or more inclusive SMQ. And let's look at one of the examples. Here is one of the quite easy hierarchical SMQs, hematopoietic cytopenias. And you know that a cytopenia is just having less of a certain type of blood cells. And it could be related to either the erythrocytes, the leukocytes, or the thrombocytes, or maybe also a cytopenia affecting more than one type of blood cells. So depending on your question, you might want to just look at the hematopoietic erythrocytopenia, or if you have a chemotherapy treatment, you might be more interested into the hematopoietic leukopenia, and then you would just run one of the sub-SMQs. And if you're interested in all cytopenias, you would just combine the 4 sub-SMQs and have all the terms which are thought to be queried if you look at the hematopoietic cytopenias, the superordinate level. We already said level 1 SMQ, so this upper hierarchy level is the level 1. And then going down through the hierarchy, you can have up to 5 levels. And all these levels which are shown here would be called level 2. But we have more complicated SMQs which have more than these 2 levels. And I will also show those to you in the browser demonstration. Then, as every MedDRA term, also the SMQs have a status and a term status. We don't call it current or non-current, just to make it very clear that it's different from the MedDRA term status. That is why in SMQs, the status is called active or inactive. Terms are assigned to an SMQ. They have a status flag. So once a term is added, it will be always included, same as we don't take the LLTs out of the MedDRA terminology if they become non-current. So a term which was added to an SMQ at some point, it will always stay in that SMQ, but it will change its status. So if it's active, it will have the status active and should be used for query. But after review, if users tell us, oh, this PT is producing so much noise and provide good data to support that, it might be made inactive. So this is how terms are treated in SMQs. There is one SMQ that is made inactive. That is the predecessor of the pregnancy neonatal topics SMQ. And because we have that other SMQ now, it was removed from the MedDRA browser and is visible in, I mean, if you use an older version, you see it, but it has been archived and can be looked at. But just not to confuse people, because we have the new SMQ pregnancy and neonatal topics. Okay. Then we already discussed versioning a bit and talked a lot about versioning in the last webinar. For the SMQs, you are quite out of, it's quite easy for you because the upversioning of SMQs is performed by the MedDRA maintenance and support service organization. So we are doing the work for you. We check that non-current terms are not included in an SMQ. We check that all relevant new PTs will be included in the SMQ. But what you need to do is that you check that the SMQ version has the same MedDRA version as your coded data. And it's very important that you do not use an SMQ, an old SMQ on newer data, because if we add a more specific MedDRA term, for example, if we take breast cancer and there is an SMQ, we add a new term, a very specific one, HER2 positive breast cancer, for example. You might want to code that term and already did in your data, and you run the old SMQ, which did not include that term. You would not find all these new coded cases, and you would just look at part of your of the data which you should have retrieved. So important to always use the same SMQ version and the same MedDRA version as the MedDRA version your data is coded in. The same applies if we change, if a PT is promoted or demoted, the SMQ will change. It will not be shown as active or inactive because it will still be at the LLT level included. But you might not find it if you're looking at the PT level, for example. So it's very important to keep in mind, you don't need to do all the versioning, the upversioning of the query, but you need to make sure that you use the same version of MedDRA for both the query and the coded data. And this is what I already told you. We have this example that hormone receptor positive breast cancer in breast malignant tumors. If you already coded it, but then use the old query, you might miss something. I would now, maybe before we continue with the presentation, show you some useful additional information about the SMQs. And for that, we will go to the MedDRA website, search for SMQ. And we have a certain page which describes a bit more about SMQs in general, but you find also important additional information on SMQs on this in the related links. So there's one link which is called SMQ status, which you can look at. Let's open the file, and you see you get a list of all the SMQ topics of SMQs which are in production. It's a nice overview. You can also find this information, of course, in the SMQ introductory guide. Let's open that one as well. So, of course, you have that information in the table of contents, but you can also find it in the web-based browser, and I will show you that later on. Then we have the SMQ matrix, which is an Excel file which describes all SMQ topics, not only those which were developed and are in production, but also SMQ topics which were discontinued or rejected. So for some, the discontinued ones, there was some effort undertaken to develop an SMQ. It's not always possible to find a good query. And sometimes the development will be discontinued. For other SMQ proposals, these were rejected before continuing. So you have different status in development, in production, discontinued, rejected. And then the one archive one, which I already told you, the adverse pregnancy outcome, reproductive toxicity, which was replaced by the SMQ pregnancy and neonatal topics. So if you are considering further queries which are not yet SMQs, please remember that we have this SMQ matrix spreadsheet, because it gives you an idea of what has already been discussed, what has been tested to prepare an SMQ, but did not failed and was discontinued, and which ones have been rejected. Okay. Then we also have a very helpful spreadsheet, which is the SMQ spreadsheet. This is an Excel file which is provided with every MedDRA release package. So it's part of the download, where you download the MedDRA version. Unfortunately, therefore, it's not very easily accessible for everybody. But please, if you feel this is a helpful Excel file and you would like to have it, just ask your MedDRA experts in your company to provide it to you. Because this Excel spreadsheet has several tabs. It shows you the hierarchy of the SMQs, and you can see with these small plus signs that these are hierarchical SMQs. You can open them one by one. You can also use the Excel functionality and open all the layers of an SMQ. And you see that some have 4 levels. There's the hepatic disorders is the one which has even up to 5 levels. On this first tab, you just have the hierarchy. On the next tab, you have both the hierarchy plus the terms in the SMQ. And this is one way of seeing also the sub classification of the broad terms for the algorithmic SMQs. So if we open the anaphylactic reactions SMQ, you see our narrow search terms, and then you see the broad search terms, and you see here that we have the category B terms, we have the category C terms, and then the category D terms. So this is one of the ways to see the categories. The other way I will show when we have a browser demonstration, because also in the SMQ view in the browser you can see the term category. Let me show you just shortly the lupus SMQ. Lupus, no, where did I? Systemic lupus erythematosus. And you see, you also have narrow search term. It's also an algorithmic SMQ. You have the broad search terms, which are divided into several categories. And because lupus is affecting lots of different organ systems, you have lots of these categories up to I. So this is our most complex algorithmic SMQ. But as you see, you have all these, the search terms. And let me just open one of the hierarchical SMQs just to show you how it looks. So the hepatic disorders was one of the more complex hierarchical ones. And you see first you go through the down through the hierarchy, and if you're on the sub SMQ level, it includes the terms which have to be queried. Then the next tab provides you with an SMQ summary. These are the level 1 SMQs, and you can check how many hierarchical SMQs we have, which ones are the hierarchical SMQs. You can also see which SMQ has an algorithm and which are the algorithmic ones. And not all of the SMQs have a narrow and a broad scope, so you could also check which ones do have a broad scope at all, and which ones do have a narrow scope. Now it might be a bit strange to see that the narrow scope, some don't have a narrow scope, but as you see, all of these are hierarchical, and the uppermost level does not include any terms. So it's the sub SMQs which include then the narrow scope terms. And this is what I showed you here, the hepatic disorders. You don't see any terms, you just see sub SMQs below that SMQ. Then you have a count of terms in the SMQs. So I think this is helpful for a QC exercise. If you run a query, you want to make sure that you included all PTs, for example. So I think it's more for really quality checks than for understanding. Of course, it also shows you how big an SMQ is, but I would see it in that way. And then you have this tab where you see all the active PT codes. It's actually the same information which we had before, but this time you don't have the PT name, but a code which never changes. So if your database coordinators who do these searches, if they like the codes better than the terms, you can also give them the terms. And for that, it's a very useful tab in this spreadsheet. As said, I really like this. I always use this more than anything else because for me the overview was better. It's in the download files, so you might need to ask somebody to send it to you. Okay. Then let's look at benefits and limitations of using SMQs. The benefits of using an SMQ is that they can be applied across multiple therapeutic areas. They are not product or drug class specific. They have been validated and really tested before release. Usually there was at least one industry and one regulatory database for testing the query. Sometimes even after the testing, they have been refined and then tested again to make the search results really usable. They are reusable and allow for standardized communication of safety information between the pharmaceutical companies and regulators. They also allow for consistency in the way data retrievals are set up and run. And the other big benefit is the gain in efficiency, because the SMQs are maintained and versioned centrally by the MSSO and the JMO, and thereby reduce the amount of work to be done on your part. There are some limitations that you should be aware of. First of all, not all medical topics and safety issues are covered by SMQs. So there will still be scenarios where you have to build your own query, and that is why it is important that you know how to do it. And then after release into production, SMQs further evolve and undergo further refinement. And even though they have been tested during their development. So we try to do our best in adding new terms. But if you notice that an SMQ produces a lot of noise, please also let us know, because the MSSO does not have their own database, so we cannot test, and we are reliant on subscriber feedback if something needs to be changed. Also, if you find that some terms may be missing in the SMQ, or you think they too much is included, wrong terms are included, you have the possibility to send us a change request for the SMQs as well. And this is done via the normal change request process in the web change request tool. So any questions before I demonstrate the browser SMQ view?
Thank you, Annie. We've had a couple of people that have asked, can you please show where to access the SMQ spreadsheet that you showed? So I know it's in the download section, but I wondered if you'd mind demonstrating. Thank you.
I can demonstrate it, but I cannot fully demonstrate it. Let me go to, so on the MedDRA website, you have this downloads button up here. It's directly logging me in, which is always nice. And then you see what kind of things you can download. And you have the browsers, you have supplemental changes and so on. But then you have the MedDRA versions going back until 2004. So not the very beginning. And if you open the MedDRA version 27.1, you have the MedDRA release package in English or other languages, and you can download it. And this, then you loaded the complete MedDRA version. So you have the MedDRA ASCII files, the sequential ASCII files, then what's new document, the version report, the introductory guide, and everything. But it also includes this version report 27.1 in English. And if you click on it, you need a password. And I can also show you how to access the password. It might depend on your position in the company, whether you can easily access it. So we have the self-service application where you can download and here it says the MedDRA ANSIP password. That is what you need, but it's just for the MedDRA subscription points of contact. So every company has certain people which are notified to the MedDRA MSSO as subscription points of contact. You can retrieve your MedDRA subscription point of contact also subscription contact. So if you need to know who that person is in your company, you can use this, enter your email, you get a one-time code which you enter in the next page, and you will find out who is your subscription contact. Otherwise, you would just go to retrieve MedDRA unzip password if you are that subscription point of contact, and you would also get the same page here. You enter your email. If you are the right person, you get a one-time code, which you put into the next screen, and then it opens and you see the unzip password. I cannot show you because you would see mine, and I cannot breach our security as such. Leander, do you think I answered those questions?
Absolutely, Annie. That's a great demonstration on how to access it, and we've had some thumbs up. So thanks very much, everyone, for the feedback. If anyone does have issues, you can always contact the MSSO help desk either through the chat function on our website. Annie is now going to do another demonstration up there on the top right hand side. It's contacts. Through the thank you. So there's at the bottom, there's a queries page that you can fill in, or the help button, which links you directly into our help desk if they're online, or you can email us at mssohelp@meddra.org. So yes, great demonstration. Thank you, Annie, for that.
Yeah,
no more
thanks
questions.
for the additional details. Okay, then let me just go back. And this is where I wanted to show you the MedDRA browser. Let's start. So with the new web-based browser, I will just shortly jump to the old one. Where do I have it? Session timed out. That is also one nice thing about the new browser. You don't need to log in as frequently as with the old one. So just very shortly, for those people who love the old one, want to continue using it, are not really ready yet to change to the new one. Here in the middle, you have the browser view, which is usually starting in the SOC view. You can change it to SMQ view. And instead of the SOCs, you see the SMQs here. I will now switch to the new web-based browser because the rest actually is the same between the two. And in the new browser, you have as well, this is where you change between the SOC and the SMQ view. Now we want to see the SMQs, and you see you get a long list of SMQs here. And before starting looking at the SMQs, I would like to show you the legend, which you find here. And just shortly to explain what this means. So SMQs, inactive SMQs would be shown as an SMQ with a red box around it. We don't see any inactive SMQs in this browser view because the one inactive SMQ which we have was archived because it was another SMQ took its place. Then also on the PT level, they are shown in blue or in red depending on the scope. So the blue ones are the narrow scope PTs, the red ones are the broad scope PTs. If any PT has a red thing around it, then it's an inactive term. And then you can also see in the PT symbol whether it is a broad scope term in a certain category for the algorithmic SMQs. Then usually we don't have LLTs in the SMQs. I'm not aware of any where we would have that, but same would be shown that if it's if it has this red square around it, it's an inactive one. If it's in addition, if it's red, it's a non-current inactive one. It's a non-current active one and a non-current inactive one. I think this is really not very relevant because I've never seen those. Okay, this is how you read the symbols in front of the term name. Then these are all the SMQs in production. You see that they have these small plus signs. And we can start with the acute renal failure SMQ, for example. If I click it, it opens and you see all the narrow term PTs in blue, and then the broad search terms in red. And you see there is one inactive one, the nephritic syndrome, which was not removed, but made inactive. Oh, sorry. Need to go back. Then if looking at another SMQ, the acute pancreatitis, for example, you see one of the narrow search PTs is inactive. But then if you go down, you see the broad search terms, they have the categories. So this hints at this as being one of the algorithmic SMQs, and you have B terms, C terms. And then let's look at one of the hierarchical SMQs. Let's take the most complicated one, the hepatic disorders. You see if I open it, it just shows other SMQs, so the sub-SMQs. And if you take this one, you see still sub-SMQs, the severe events only, and then this is really the lowest level. I think this is a quite complicated view on going down through the levels. So if you are looking at a very complex hierarchical SMQ, I would always recommend you to go to the SMQ introductory guide. And it's quite a nice document. We are anyways in the table of contents, so you can just click on the page number for hepatic disorders and it takes you to the hepatic disorders SMQ description. And as I said before, the introductory guide is a really helpful document because it defines what the people setting up this SMQ thought about when they added terms to it. So you have a definition of the hepatic disorders, you have inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then what I wanted to show you is that for the hierarchical SMQs, usually you have a flow chart showing how the different sub-SMQs relate to each other. So you see this is the superordinate level. Then you have these 5 sub-SMQs as level 2 SMQs. This one, drug-related hepatic disorders comprehensive search, has another 4 sub-SMQs. And the drug-related hepatic disorders severe events only then has further sub-SMQs. And this one is going into the 5th level. So you have different possibilities to see the hierarchy structure. You have the Excel spreadsheet. You can see it in the browser, although I think the browser has other strengths than just showing the hierarchy. You can see it, but for the very complex ones, I would really recommend go into the MedDRA the SMQ introductory guide and look at a nice overview of how this SMQ looks like, which sub SMQs you have to choose from for combining for your specific topic of interest. Okay. Then we have, you can search for SMQs. So as I was looking at the SMQ spreadsheet, I had in mind lupus, and I was searching under L. I didn't find it. So if I'm sure there is a lupus SMQ, I would just add lupus into the search field and directly find the SMQ systemic lupus erythematosus. And then I know, okay, in the Excel spreadsheet, I should not look under L, but under S because the name is different. It also gives you PTs, which include the word lupus. And if you click on these, you can see in which SMQs these PTs are or to which SMQs these PTs are added. And let's lupus encephalitis. You see that often they have more than one SMQ. Let's maybe look at the neonatal one. You see it's congenital familial genetic disorders SMQ, one of the sub-SMQs of the pregnancy and neonatal disorders, and the immune-mediated autoimmune disorders and the systemic lupus erythematosus. Same for the LLTs. You can see which to which PT they link, and then the PT into which SMQ it falls. Okay, then I would like to show you one other functionality of the browser, and that is from here I can also export SMQs. So if we go back, let's close the hepatic one. If we take this SMQ, acute pancreatitis, I could export the SMQ. Let's right click and then SMQ export. This is asking for the language, or it's saying in which language it will be exported, the version. It also provides you with the SMQ code. Maybe important for you to know that SMQs always start with the 2, MedDRA terms with the 1. And the SMQ name is also included. Then you can choose whether you want to include inactive PTs or not. Let's do it without. You say export. A new document opens. And you see that, let's make it a little nicer. The SMQ export was done in English. You get the date and timestamp for it. And it also tells you that you did not include inactive PTs. You have the SMQ name, and in the SMQ file name, the SMQ code is added, not the name. And then you see that you have the English PT name, you have the code. It tells you which level it is, and that means this is the English MedDRA term name. You have the scope. This is now sorted alphabetically, so you don't have the same view as in the browser that you always have the narrow scope first and then the broad scope. You have the category. You have weights. So for this SMQ, we don't use any weights. You see the status, and you see when any change to the term was done in this SMQ. So abdominal compartment syndrome, for example, was added in version 11.1 and was not changed since then. This is what you see when you export it. And let's close it and let's export it again. This time including the inactive PTs, just to show you what it looks like. And this is strange. This is not what I expected. Let's go back and see what went wrong. Usually you would get a, let's take another SMQ. Let's export the renal failure, see whether this works. Otherwise I would need to tell our people. Seems to be a bug in this one. Let's try the other web-based browser, because you can also do the same here. You have the SMQ export. You can also include the inactive PTs, and you get the same spreadsheet, slightly differently ordered if you use the old web-based browser, and you see that the inactive PTs are highlighted with a yellow underline or yellow, that the complete line is color-coded in yellow. Okay. Then there's one more thing I would like to show you in the browser, and that is that you can see, and let's do it in the new one, you can see a description of the SMQ. So if you right-click on the SMQ and you say Open Details, a separate small window opens and you get the SMQ code, SMQ name, and also a very short description of the SMQ, the source, and an SMQ node. It's not as much information as you find in the SMQ introductory guide. So I would always recommend first read the introductory guide, but if you know your SMQ and you just want to quickly check something on it, then this is a nice way to review as well in the browser to get a very short overview. And let's go back to the hepatic disorders SMQ and see here, if you open the details of the highest level, the level 1 SMQ, you get a description. And if you take one of the lower levels, let's take the liver malignant tumors, for example, it says this sub-SMQ is sub-search of and gives you less information, but you see that it gives you the level, it has an SMQ code, and so on. So a nice way to get some information about SMQs in the browser as well. Okay, this is what I had planned to show you in the browser view. Are there any questions?
No questions. Just one more demo on how to access the new web-based browser, if you wouldn't mind. I did explain it in the chat, but if you're able to just show on the website where you get to the new web-based browser, thank you, Anne.
So you can go via How to Tools, and then you click on Browsers. And here you have a link, open the new web-based browser. Or you just say new web-based browser, and you get this email, which is describing that we launched it. And you can also click here in this hyperlink, and it takes you to the new web-based browser. Or I don't know, maybe people also are happy that it's not changed. Let's go back to the MedDRA.org website. If you click on the web-based browser up here, it still takes you to the old one. So different ways to find it. You can copy the link which Leander provided into your URL bar up here, save it as a favorite, or you go via the How to Tools browsers, and then you find it as a link on the side. Let's do it quickly again. So here, open the new web-based browser, and it opens. One of the nice new features is that it always remembers you and will open in the way you used it last. So for me, it's as I'm working at the MSSO, I already have the 28.0 version. I'm using English. I added some of the additional buttons up here. So that is staying in the way you last closed it. Okay, I think with that, this question should be answered. Let's go back.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Anne. No more questions at this time. Thank you.
Oh, no, but I remembered one other thing which I really find helpful is if you're in the SOC view and you're searching for terms which you might add to a query. So if you add lupus and you find a nice lupus term, let's take this one, and you say open details, it will open up the term details, and it also does in the old web-based browser. And you see down here in which SMQs this term is included. So if you're setting up a search query and you find that, oh, I'm looking for arrhythmias, and you type arrhythmia, and the first thing you see is, okay, this is part of an SMQ. Maybe stop searching all the terms, but first go to the SMQ introductory guide, read up on the SMQ and see whether you can use the SMQ instead of setting up your own query. So this is what I also wanted to show you. Now, we would like to also show you the SMQ analysis tool and how you can use it to run or how you can use the features of the browsers to help you in your analysis. And I think maybe I jump the explanation of the MedDRA browsers. Maybe just we have 3 at the moment, 4. We have one MedDRA desktop browser which can be downloaded, and you also download the release files. It's then you're not dependent on internet access. And then we have the mobile browser, which is perfected for use on mobile devices. It does not have all the functionalities, but it's very good for searching. And then we have the MedDRA web-based browser or browsers at the moment, the new one and the old one, which I have been showing you already. And then maybe important, all of the browsers require a MedDRA ID and password. You can view the MedDRA SOCs and the SMQs. They support all MedDRA languages. Also, we have a language-specific interface for all the languages. And you have the ability to search, to export your search results into a research bin and then download it to your local file system. This is only possible for the MedDRA desktop and web-based browser. And this functionality we looked at in the webinar last week and will not do it today. And then what you can also do, you can see upcoming supplemental changes only in the web-based browser because that is always updated. You can see the primary and secondary link information. And what I wanted to show you now is that you can upload terms to run them against SMQs. And one other nice feature is if you're searching, you have advanced search options where you can also include not or. I don't know whether you've used that before, but please try if you're interested in that. So how can one run the SMQ? In principle, an SMQ is like any other query. So if you remember the image which I showed before about the databases and the query, you would do it in the same way. And from the IT perspective, an SMQ is just a stored query. So you would load the SMQ with its PTs and or LLTs into your query tool and run it against the coded MedDRA terms in your clinical or drug safety database and look for hits or matches. And of course, it makes sense to use all the SMQ options. So consider the narrow and broad searches, consider whether you can run an algorithm like we've seen for the acute pancreatitis SMQ. But again, you need some more technical possibilities to use the algorithm. And maybe before you want to do it, discuss with the people running the query whether they can do it. And then, of course, also think about the hierarchy. Do you want to run the complete SMQ, or do you want to, are you interested in a sub-search, a sub-concept of that complete query? So now we are looking at a practical exercise, and we built a small data set of 33 coded terms in 17 patients. And we want to see which cases have hits to any SMQ. So are there any potential cases of interest? So what we do is, I will show you later in the new web-based browser, there is this SMQ analysis feature. In the old web-based browser, you find it next to the hierarchy analysis, which we discussed before. So it's the SMQ analysis button, which you need to press. And it opens a new window where you can decide what kind of search you want to do. You can define the MedDRA version, make it match your data version. You can define whether you want a narrow or a broad search. And then you can even say, I just want to run one SMQ over my data, or the default is that if you don't select SMQs, that all SMQs would be run. And you can also select then the algorithmic search output. And we will now do this and run it with the broad search on all SMQs. Let me jump back to our browser. I think, no, this is the, here. You can find the SMQ analysis tool under this tools button. So if you click on this tools button, you get the MedDRA version analysis tool, the hierarchy analysis tool, and the SMQ analysis. If you click on it, you make some selections on the type of data you want to add. We're going to do it on version 27.0 because that is the version of the data. We decided to take a broad search, and let's just do it for all SMQs at the moment, but here you would be able to select SMQs or even just sub-SMQs, so you can really define what SMQ should be run over your data. Then you say next after doing these first selections. And here, if you did not remember in the way in which the data needs to be formatted, it tells you again. So the data must be in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. The first row needs to contain a row ID, LLT and PT, term names, the code, and the case ID. So if you're doing an English search, the row ID is optional. But if you're doing an English language search, you can add either the term name or the code or both. If you do it in other languages, you definitely need the codes, but you can give the PT term name as well. And then the case ID is optional, but it's always very helpful to have it because that is how you then identify your patients again. So I would recommend to use it. Let me show you. I have a pre-formatted Excel spreadsheet with a row ID, the term name, the term code, and the case ID. And this is the spreadsheet which I will now load into the system. So I click here, choose file. The tool is running. In 4 seconds, you get a new Excel spreadsheet. And you see here, it's done the SMQ analysis on that spreadsheet. You get a date stamp. And it also tells you which MedDRA version was used, that you wanted a broad search, and that all SMQs were selected. And out of the 33 rows, now you have 95. And you see that the MedDRA terms, for example, acute kidney injury, is included in a lot of SMQs, but just as a narrow search term in the acute renal failure SMQ. You also see that some of the terms have categories. So if there is a C, you know this is an algorithmic SMQ. Here is another algorithmic SMQ with a C. And here, systemic lupus erythematosus even says there is an H. Let's do the same thing, but have some different pre-selections. And I would like to do the algorithmic search. Let's again do it on all SMQs. We take the same spreadsheet. And now you see that you get a different output. So there are a lot less terms, which makes a lot of sense because we don't have that many algorithmic SMQs. You see that for the acute pancreatitis, the case for amylase abnormal, and let's change our spreadsheet in a way that we can see the case ID, and abdominal distension, both from the same case, were retrieved. Also for the SLE, you see that this is a narrow search term which was found. And for the, if we are looking at systemic lupus erythematosus in general, you see that for the patient 14, some of the terms are only found for this, I mean, they are also in the broad scope, but these would be retrieved based on the combination of terms and a weight which is given to them. So this is really a very complicated SMQ, and it will make a lot of sense before you use it to read up on how it can be used and how it should be used. But this is something which, even if your programming has trouble in doing the algorithm, you could ask them for a broad search and then run that broad search in the SMQ analysis tool, and you would, with the algorithm selected, and you would get a programmed output identifying those cases where the algorithm was matched. Okay. Let me just check whether there was more I wanted to show you, but I think that was it. We will go through some of it again in the slides. So we did the browser demonstration. We looked at the broad scope search. We saw, of course, it includes all the narrow search term as well. It includes hierarchical SMQs. And in this search, the algorithm is not used. If you use the algorithm, it gives you a very different output, as we saw, and it's also clearly identified here. So now I would like to demonstrate some applications of SMQs. And mostly SMQs were used in the beginning in the post-marketing area, but it was quickly also realized that they are helpful for broader use. So SMQs can be utilized as well in clinical trials for screening when the safety profile is not fully established, or you could use a specific SMQ for case identification to check whether there is a safety issue which you suspect based on preclinical data or a known class effect. And then you could retrieve cases for continuous review. In post-marketing, selected SMQs can be used to retrieve cases for suspected or known safety issues. They can also be applied for signal detection, even using all the SMQs in large data sets. Or you could use them as to program your single case alerts, so that if a PT from a certain SMQ is hit, that you would get an alert to review that case directly. And then in periodic reporting, you can use SMQs to aggregate cases for safety analysis and for other issues, like, for example, lack of efficacy. This is more for getting an understanding of how you followed me. So what would you do when considering to use an SMQ? So waiting a bit for some people to answer. Read the guidance documents first. I was hoping for that. Thanks a lot. Read the introductory guide. Yes, usually you consider whether you need a narrow or broad search. Narrow is often the one which you start off with. See which PTs are included. Very good. Yes. Check what is included. Read the guide. So I think my message was quite clear. Yes. Thanks a lot. In the interest of time, let's move on. And when requesting a broad scope SMQ, what do you include or what do you expect as a search result? And this is multiple choice, broad terms only, broad and narrow terms, broad terms and some narrow terms, a selection of broad and narrow terms, or none of the above. And yes, also thank you here. We want the broad and narrow terms because the narrow terms are the ones which best describe our topic of interest. So we never exclude those, and we add the broad terms to have to retrieve more cases which we then look at. Broad terms and some narrow terms, that would be a customization and would not be an SMQ anymore. So it can be done, but be very careful that you don't call it an SMQ. You would need to call it a customized MedDRA query, maybe based on a modified SMQ. But it would also mean that if you describe your search strategy, that you need to list all PTs which you used, because you cannot just say SMQ. If you use an SMQ, everybody can go into the SMQ documentation and check which PTs are included. If you change it, you need to list every single PT which was included in your search strategy. And same for broad terms and some narrow terms, a selection of broad and narrow terms. Both of these are customized queries. So let's move on. And let's look at two scenarios. So one is your company started the development of a new drug for onychomycosis, which is projected to take 8 years and cost $1.2 billion. So lots and lots of money. And this is, onychomycosis is just a foot swamp disease. So not a very important, but of course a disease which you don't want to have, but not very critical to the health of the patient. Toenail fungus. And then as part of your safety surveillance, you decide to periodically run SMQs for serious AEs against your data. And you identify 5 possible cases of hemolytic anemia in your 1,000 patient exposure. And 1,000 patient is not much. Hemolytic anemia is a severe adverse event. And based on this, you make a risk-benefit assessment, which is unfavorable. Because remember, your drug is for nail fungus. And you suggest stopping the development of the project. Your management reviews and follows your recommendation. And although it's sad that a drug does not make it to the market, you save a lot of time, money, resources, and of course you decrease the risk for the patient. So your job was very well done. Another example could be that you are developing the 4th drug in a therapeutic class, and as a class effect, all other products in the class are associated with the development of high blood pressure and angioedema. It's for a serious target disease, so this is considered an acceptable risk. And you decide that because of these known class effects, you run the hypertension SMQ and the angioedema SMQ against your data set. And over time, it becomes clear that your drug does not seem to be associated with either of these risks as the other drugs in the therapeutic class. Thus, your potential and careful approach has provided the patients a safer alternative for the treatment of their disease, and maybe also expanded the market potential of the drug. So, again, congratulations. No, let's look at some customized searches, and we discussed quite a lot of the prerequisites in the webinar before. So a customized search can be done by modifying an SMQ. Usually you should not modify an SMQ because we want to have this standard intact, but there are sometimes good reasons to do so. If you do it, it means you do not have a standard SMQ anymore. And you need to clearly indicate that by adding, for example, modified MedDRA query based on an SMQ to the name. The modifications all need to be documented. And if you describe your SMQ, it means like for all your own design queries, you need to provide a list of PTs which were used in that query. It also means that because you changed it, you will be responsible for the version updates and the maintenance because nobody else knows that you did this new modified MedDRA query based on an SMQ. Of course, the MedDRA version analysis tool can help you with that because it also shows you what was changed in the original SMQ. So there are some means to get help from the MedDRA version analysis tool. And then one SMQ that is frequently modified is, for example, the lack of efficacy or lack of effect SMQ if you want to make that specific for a particular product. And let's look into the content of this lack of efficacy effect SMQ. This is version 27, and you see a lot of device terms, drug terms, prosthetic terms, vaccination failure. So this really is a very broad term, broad search, which might not be necessary for a particular drug or a particular device. So if you are looking, for example, for a vaccine failure, you might not want all the device terms and drug terms in addition to the vaccine failure. Same if you're looking for a very specific device, for example, an intrauterine device for contraception. Maybe you don't want the drug terms or the vaccination terms. So this can be modified. I would suggest that before you do any modifications, you try to run the search without the modification because often for a particular drug or device, not all of these terms are coded. So if they don't create noise, the modification might not be necessary at all. But this is up to you to decide. And we just wanted to highlight that this is one where modifications are often done and often make sense. But remember, it would be a modified MedDRA query based on an SMQ and would need to be clearly labeled in this way. Then if there is no MedDRA query which you can use or which you can modify, you might need to set up your own query. And we discussed a lot about the principles in the last webinar, so I would also ask you to go back to that. You need the medical knowledge. You need to read up on the topic of interest. You need a lot of knowledge of the structure and the characteristics of MedDRA and of your data, meaning please remember that there are some non-multi-axial SOCs which you need to search for terms which you need to include into your query, for example. Refer to the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation points to consider document for further query construction tips. And very importantly, as you put a lot of effort into a query, save that query for future use. And remember that you also describe clearly what you used as in and exclusion criteria and the definition of the topic you were looking for. Remember that you need to maintain that query for MedDRA version changes if you want to reuse it. And if you feel you came up with a very nice query for a relevant concept, We also are happy if you submit it as a proposal for a new development of an SMQ. That can be done via the WebCR tool as well. So I would like to stop here for last minute questions. Leander, do we have anything?
We've just had one pop in, Anne. What happened if we have a lot of cases to analyse and each one have their own version from 24.1 to 27.1? Should we have to download an analysis for each version?
Well, you should have your data in one MedDRA version to review it, because otherwise you will have a problem in building that query. You would need to, if your data is in different MedDRA versions, your query would need to allow for all these different MedDRA versions. So most people try to have the data in one MedDRA version and then to also build the query in one MedDRA version. I hope this was the answer to the question. Otherwise, I will also have a look at it after the meeting and maybe respond in writing again if this answer was not enough. Any other questions, Leander?
Thanks, Annie. Yep, we've got one more that's just come in. How can we identify the PTs that belong to a secondary SOC?
Yes, you can see the PTs in the browser. If you open, let me shortly show you. For any given PT, let me see whether I can do it here. No, if you're in the SOC view and you search, so you can just open the details and you see the complete hierarchy of that PT with the primary SOC highlighted. Then if you have a longer list of terms, you can use the hierarchy analysis tool. But due to time constraints, I'm not able to show that again now. It was discussed in the webinar last week. So you're very welcome to watch that webinar recording or any of the other recordings of that webinar on YouTube. It's the data retrieval and query building webinar.
Thank you, Anne. There's no other questions at this time, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Then just as a summary, we review the data retrieval and presentation points to consider document, and we discuss the characteristics, uses and application, and benefits of the standardized MedDRA queries. And as a last, well, you have this in your slide deck, we have helpful information about MedDRA, so the MedDRA website, the help desk email, a link to our frequently asked question page where you can find answers to those questions, the link to the MedDRA browsers. I added this, but I showed it also in several times in the demonstration how to access the new web-based browser. And then if you want to submit a change request, you can find the URL for doing that. There's a link to the training schedule as well as to the MedDRA support documentation, which includes the PTC documents, MedDRA introductory guide, and the introductory guide for SMQs, as well as other important MedDRA information. And also this slide, we already showed you how you can keep in contact with MedDRA. We are on social media. We have the contact link. We have the help desk live chat. And you can join several social media channels, different WhatsApp groups in different languages, and a Chinese WeChat group. So you're very welcome to stay in contact and use our trainings. And with that, if there is no last minute question, I would like to say thank you and also thank Leander for your great support.
Thank you, Anne. No, there's no more questions, and thanks for all the feedback, everyone. So please do enjoy the webinar. So with that, Anne, I'll close the webinar, and thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.